there's two ways broadly you can go. You can be direct or indirect. So to be direct, you want to go up and just sort of own why you're talking to her. You can just go up and say, hey, listen, you look really cute. I wanted to come and say hello. My name's Troy. So you kind of own up front the fact that you're attracted to her. The other thing that you can do, like you said, is you can also be more indirect. So you can walk up and start a conversation about what's happening around her, or, I mean, the most pussified way of doing it, I suppose, is asking for directions, which I wouldn't recommend necessarily.
You're listening to the premier podcast for men who want to not only be better with women, but want to be better men in general. This is the Come On Man podcast. And here's your host, Paul Bauer.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another week of Come On Man. If you haven't done so already, please like, subscribe, hit those notifications. You know what to do. Drop a comment. Your favorite comment will do. Your favorite emoji. Your favorite comment. Your favorite emoji. You know what I'm talking about. I say this every week. That all helps us out in the algorithms. If you guys are listening on your favorite audio platform of choice, give us a 5-star review and write out why you like the show. Follow me on social media. The links are in the description. I'm on all the good platforms that way. You know what? On Twitter, we can actually send voice messages now, just like you can on Instagram. So if you ever want to schedule like a one-off call or something like that, you can hit me up on Twitter now and I can send you voice messages. It's pretty nice. Check out the Patreon, patreon.com/comeonmanpod. Man, I can't talk today. Get on the Patreon, patreon.com/comeonmanpod. You can join for as little as $10. Get added to the beer club credits at the end of Monday's episodes. That supports the show quite a bit. And then if you want any kind of coaching, date coaching, life coaching, whatever, I've been around the block. See all this gray hair? These are lessons learned right here. Get on the Patreon at tiers 2 or tiers 3 if you want any kind of coaching. Get on the email list.comeonmanpod.com. I will send you some free stickers for your troubles. If you like those designs, they're available on merch as well. I got hats, t-shirts, hoodies, backpacks. I got a Rule Zero backpack available in the store. If you guys want that for your kids. My son wanted a Rule Zero backpack for school next year, so I ordered him one. So he could tell the ladies what's up. Oh, man. Anyway, that helps support the show. Check out my Practical Law of Attraction course, loa.comeonmanpod.com. Once you get your mind right, like all the stuff that I talk about on the podcast, leveling up, getting better with women, getting more money, all that kind of stuff, that all starts with your mindset. And my course will show you basically how to take control of your life. When you take control of your mindset, take control of your thinking, miracles will happen. Okay. And it's not magic, it's psychology. So check out that course. I'll play a commercial for that here in just a minute. But before I do, let me tell you about my guest today. My guest is the legendary Troy Francis. Now, I started last year I started in 2021 interviewing the Rule Zero guys, right? But the very first Rule Zero guy I ever talked to was Paul Benjamin. And if you guys ever want to go back and listen to that episode, it was on the difference between red pill toxic and being red pill aware. Great episode. Paul, I've learned so much from Paul and the other Rule Zero guys since then. And then after that, I had Rollo on. I had Rich Cooper. He's no longer on Rule Zero, but I had Rich Cooper on. I had Aaron Clary on. Then I had Ryan Stone on. Then I had John Fitch on. I also had Paul Benjamin on again for a second time to talk about how the love languages are bullshit. So I finally started working my way down, but I had never talked one-on-one with Troy Francis until today, or this episode anyway, because it's pre-recorded, space-time continuum. Anyway, I had a guy reach out to me. He wanted to know about cold approach and how to get over cold approach anxiety. And the thing is that I often teach more about dating apps, because that was my experience getting back on the dating circuit. Is all the dates I went on were on dating apps. I didn't do a whole lot of cold approaching because there's no cold approach in the cow pasture, right? I live out in the middle of ranch country. There's no great places to do day game or night game or any of that kind of stuff. So I was like, you know what? I haven't talked to Troy yet. Why don't I ask the expert? Okay. Troy is probably one of the best guys in the game. Okay. And so I reached out to Troy. He's a fellow Rule Zero panelist. And I was like, Troy, we've never talked, man. I want to do an episode on this. Can you come on? He was like, absolutely. So I will bring you Troy Francis. He's like the real life James Bond. All right. You guys are going to get a lot of that out of this episode. And guess what? A lot of the stuff that he teaches when it comes to cold approach is the stuff that I learned in Dr. Robert Glover's Dating Essentials for Men, which was fascinating to find out. So stay tuned. I will bring you that conversation right after these words. Are you struggling to find a good quality woman? They are very rare indeed these days. If you spend any time at all watching content in the men's podcast space, or you spend time on dating apps or going out to clubs, you're seeing low quality, promiscuous women. You're finding women with daddy issues and personality disorders, or a myriad of other red flags, and you are frustrated. I get it, brother, but what if I were to tell you that the reason why you're only seeing these types of women is because of your mindset, because of your paradigm? We get what we focus on in life, and you have trained your mind to focus on the type of women that you don't want. So those are the types of women that keep showing up for you again and again. Let's change that mindset today. If you're a guy looking to attract high quality, submissive women into your life, then I've got the perfect solution for you. And let me tell you, brother, it's all about mindset. That's right. You've got to reprogram your thinking to focus on the type of women you do want. That's where my Practical Law of Attraction course comes in. It's packed with proven psychology-based techniques that will help you manifest your dream woman. Trust me, you won't find this stuff anywhere else. Explained in such a simple, easy-to-use way. And let me tell you, when you start using these methods, you'll be amazed at how quickly things start changing for you. Picture this, you're out on the town, feeling confident and magnetic. All the women are drawn to you like moth to a flame. And best of all, you're attracting the type of women that are submissive and high quality. It's not that they weren't there before, it's that you weren't aware of them before. My course will teach you how to be more hyper aware of the kind of women that you actually want. It will teach you to believe that you're the most attractive man around. And when you believe it, you'll carry yourself that way. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for my course today. Visit loa.comeonmanpod.com. That's loa.comeonmanpod.com. Start living the life you've always dreamed of. Don't miss out on this opportunity to up your game and find the woman of your dreams. The law of attraction is nothing without action. So what are you waiting for? Act now. All right, joining me on the podcast for the first time is the legendary international man of mystery, the one and only Troy Francis. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm very good, sir. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So I've had
what an introduction.
I try to come up with something unique every time for my guests, but so I've had some of the other guys from Rule Zero on the show before. This is the first time I've had you on, so I'm actually really excited for this. And the main reason I wanted to have you on was I had a guy DM me, and he asked me if I ever did an episode on cold approach and approach anxiety. Yeah. And I haven't. I've never actually done a whole episode on cold approach and approach anxiety specifically. And I thought having the best guy in the business that does that sort of thing join me to talk about it would be the smart thing to do.
Absolutely, man. Glad to be here.
Because I wanted to get a clip of this beforehand, but I didn't have enough time today. But you put out a lot of videos of you actually doing approaches in person. So if you guys are listening or watching, check out Troy's stuff, because like on his TikToks and shorts, he has a lot of that type of stuff where he's just walking up, actually cold approaching and showing you how it's done. So
yeah, well, I actually had not posted anything like that for a while. I'd sort of pulled back from it a little bit because there's a few sort of, I mean, I've got a love-hate relationship with that kind of content, to be honest. But I've got a load in the can from last year, basically, that I've started to now sort of put out again. So I put out a few of those ones that you're talking about, and they got a pretty good response. Because I think the thing is, I think guys, and this was the case for me, I think guys find it very helpful because you can say all the theory, you can talk about it until the cows come home, but to actually see somebody in the flesh doing it and see the girl's reaction and everything, I think it's really, really useful. Yeah,
a lot of guys I find sort of just talk themselves out of it. You know, they get so much approach anxiety. They see a lot of trash online about how, you know, you might get the occasional like feminist or whatever that doesn't like being approached. But I would say a majority of women actually do appreciate it. And so many guys are scared to do it that when you do it, it's kind of a bold move, you know?
Yeah. It usually gets you additional brownie points if you walk up in person and you pay a compliment and you start a conversation, you know? the horror stories are very, very few and far between. And actually, what was interesting was I was in LA recently, or at the beginning of the year. I was in Los Angeles working with a client down there, and I thought, well, I don't know how this is going to be, because obviously LA very known to be, it's quite sort of progressive. Let's say it's probably. I thought that perhaps the responses maybe they wouldn't be that good, but actually everyone was super friendly there. Like all the women that we talked to were super friendly, super welcoming, and actually were quite really quite flattered by the fact that this guy had made the approach. So it's surprising actually.
Yeah, one thing I found too, I had this guy one time on Twitter who was talking about how like he will not go up and approach chicks because every time he's ever tried, they yell at him for being a creep or whatever. And I'm like, and I was like, okay, well, sometimes that happens because you're an unattractive dude, right? Sometimes that's the case, right? If an attractive guy comes up, says the same thing, it might work better, right? She might be more receptive to that. So I was like, well, why don't you send me some pictures? He was one of those like anonymous face guys. I was like, why don't you send me some pictures? I'll keep your pictures and I'm not sharing it with anybody, but just let's see what we're working with here. Dude was a handsome kid, probably maybe 22 or something like that. Great shape. Yeah. And I was like, dude, if chicks are giving you the reaction that you're being a creep, it's because you're approaching in a creepy way, probably.
Yeah, probably. Do you know whereabouts he was based?
I think maybe in the East somewhere, maybe like New York or something. I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, I think that there is. Of course, when we talk about cold approach, people will often who have heard the term before, they might often think about classic day game, and they might think about running up to somebody in the street and blah 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 and all of that. And that is one thing that guys have done. But I mean, cold approach really encompasses a whole range of different things, doesn't it? From meeting somebody in Starbucks or the bookstore to actually meeting somebody even in a bar or even a nightclub. I mean, cold approach is the umbrella term for, what used to be called night game as well. It's basically just walking up to somebody you didn't know before and starting a conversation. So why did I go down that cul-de-sac? Well, basically to say that there might be some situations, because there is certainly societal sort of, well, certain sectors of society may disapprove of the more sort of flamboyant types of cold approach. Running up in front of some guy in the street may not be as welcomed as it in some places as it was years ago. Okay, fine, but that doesn't mean that it's impossible to do it in a different place. Like when we were in LA, the guy that I was working with, he did approach some women he saw walking down Santa Monica Boulevard. But equally, we'd go into one of the bars, there's a day party there, and we get talking to women in there, which is equally valid. And he got great reception. So I think certainly if the guy was in New York, I mean, yeah, sure, New York, there's going to be a certain progressivism of attitudes there. There's probably some quite ball breakery kind of people there. But I mean, come on, man. I mean, there's millions of people there. I mean, there's going to be opportunities,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. The way I like to look at the whole thing is you're really just testing for interest. Like if you're you're socially calibrated, it's just like talking to anybody. You walk up, you maybe ask them about the magazine they're looking at in the supermarket. If they're just not receptive to talking to you, you'll know that right away. And just it's not on you. It's like they're just they don't want to talk to you right now. It's not your problem. It's their problem.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's two ways broadly you can go. You can be direct or indirect. So to be direct, you want to go up and just sort of own why you're talking to her. So you might just go up and say, you don't have to be like mode one, you don't have to be like super sexual or anything, but you could just go up and say, hey, listen, you look really cute. I wanted to come and say hello. My name's Troy. Or you look really nice. Yeah. Wanted to say hi or whatever, right? So you kind of own up front the fact that you're attracted to her. The other thing that you can do, like you said, is you can also be more indirect. So you can walk up and start a conversation about what's happening around her. Or, I mean, the most pussified way of doing it, I suppose, is asking for directions, which I wouldn't recommend necessarily. But you could be like, "Oh, that's an like you said, that's an interesting book you're reading. What do you think about that?" Or you could be in Starbucks and she's checking out, some stuff on one of the shelves. You're like, "Oh, what about that? That's interesting. Have you ever tried that before?" Or, so you can definitely do that. And then, like you say, if she's receptive and she sort of gets into it and starts, there's a little bit of back and forth happens, then fine, you can proceed from there. If not, It's just like, oh, cool. Anyway, it's great to meet you. Have a great day, and then go.
Yeah. Speaking of mode one, actually I have all these notes that I want to talk to you about, but we're sort of going off on a tangent here. So I had a perception of mode one that it was essentially just like walking up and getting sexual right away. And then I put out a video. I was doing a series on Rollo's 49 Maxims of Game from his latest book. And one of the things like Rollo talks about is he basically asserts that indirect game tends to, I think he was sort of alluding to the fact that indirect game works better than direct game more times out than not, or whatever. So I made put a video about that, and someone tagged Alan Roger Curry. And Alan Roger Curry like hated my video. He's just like, he's like, you got me all wrong. That's not what mode one's about, blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, okay, well, all right. You know what? You're right. I haven't read your book. Let me read your book, see what it's about. And then, so I did. So I listened to his mode one book, and I was like, oh, I did have it totally off, because in the book, mode one's basically, he just talks about modes of communication. In his second book, he talks about how he does sort of gauge for interest. So what he'll do is like, he'll walk up to chicks, and like, if they let him get into their space, then he knows that they're probably receptive to being talked to sexually. But if they sort of step back or whatever, then he'll banter with them a little bit. So it's all just sort of like he's reading body language and stuff to do his mode one stuff, which was interesting. I recommend his books. But.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was obviously RIP now, sadly, but I mean, he was famously very kind of he wasn't shy about coming forward if he felt somebody had misrepresented him. Like I was telling you in the chat, me and James Tusk, he had because we were on a stream with Rollo. It was 2 years ago now, I think. Actually, it was a while ago, and we referred like in passing to mode one, and probably said, oh, you don't have to be like what I just said. Actually, you don't have to be super sexual like mode one. You could, and he saw it, and he made a whole like 3-hour kind of rant about like, oh, look at these idiots and blah blah blah. And to be honest, I've read mode one. A while ago now. I haven't read any of his other stuff, which I would quite like to, because I'm sure it's really good. So I don't really. I probably am misrepresenting it somewhat, but I do recall from the mode one book. There's that story right at the beginning of the book where
and I think that's where most people get the idea of that he's walking up being sexual, because with that chick he was doing. Exactly,
but that's not what he did. He recommended every time.
Not every time. Yeah, it was more like reading the situation, and if you could get into a woman's, he called it the left ear zone, then you know that you could get sexual with her.
Yeah. But I mean, I think like you said, I think it's useful to think about it in terms of, is there receptivity here or not? I think that's a very good and actually another great author in this, is sort of associated with this space, who wrote No More Mr. Nice Guy, Robert Glover. Okay, Robert. So Robert Glover, have you read Dating Essentials for Men?
It's funny because in the chat we were talking about Corey Wayne, and you were saying how like some of these guys have read his book like 30 times or whatever. I've actually read Corey's book 21 times, and I've read Dr. Glover's book 12 times.
What, the No More Mr. Nice Guy or the second one?
Second one. The second one I think is better than No More.
Dating Essentials for Men.
Yeah, and that's where I got the idea of testing for interest, and that's how I always approached it, because I like Glover's idea with that.
Yeah. So I read it fairly recently. I read it about 2 years ago, and James Tusk, who I work with quite a lot, he read it, as we both read it around the same time, and it's a pretty sort of straightforward book, but like you said, the one thing in it that I think is really useful is test for interest, and he basically says, I'm paraphrasing again, but basically says something like, you go around, you are as social as possible, you talk to as many different women as possible, and you just kind of feel out, okay, so is there some interest here or is there not? Yeah. It's really as simple as that. And if there isn't, then, ultimately you just excuse yourself and leave, because there's billions of women on the planet. Yeah. Most of them are not going to like you in that way, and that's absolutely fine. You just go out there and you find the ones who do, or at least who have the potential to, and then those are the ones you proceed with. So I think his way of thinking about it is actually really, really helpful.
Yeah, Yeah, his book, I actually think I highly recommend that book. And that's so when I was learning all this stuff, I'm a noob. I'm a noob to all this stuff, Troy. So I don't know if you know my story at all, but like I ended up I was married for like 15 years, got divorced. I was overweight, found myself back on the dating circuit, just floundered. I had no idea what I was doing. I'd been out of practice for 15 years, no idea what I was doing. Ended up in a relationship for 4.5 years on a chick that just sort of took pity on me, I think, and that failed. And so I found myself back on the dating circuit a second time. This time I was in shape. I had lost all the weight. I found it was easy to get dates. I couldn't keep chicks around past like 2 or 3 dates. And so that's when I started reading this stuff. But a lot of guys, I think, get into the I don't know. They have the problem of that they'll read the book, but they won't implement it,
Yeah.
Or like, like Corey Wayne says, read his book 10 to 15 times. They'll wait until they've read it 15 times before they actually go out and practice any of it.
Yeah.
I wasn't like that at all. I was like, as I was reading it, I was going out and practicing, and I was like, okay, let me reevaluate here. Let me see what, so so Dr. Glover's book I found like was really helpful for a lot of that stuff too.
Yeah, because it really lets the pressure off you as well, doesn't it? Because one of the problems with cold approach or approaching in general is that we can put this big pressure on ourselves mentally as guys. We could be like, oh, I've got to go out and it's got to be a perfect approach. I've got to say the perfect thing. And what if she doesn't laugh at my joke? And what if she rejects me? And blah blah blah. And actually, what I think a better way of doing it is to like with many things, is not to go for perfection. A lot of the time, it probably is going to be a bit awkward. It probably is going to, maybe you'll say a joke and it's going to fall flat or whatever. Well, fine. I mean, suck it up, right? So, and actually, if you mentally, you say to yourself, right, I'm not going over to talk to that girl in the red dress at the bar to try to get her to come home with me. I'm just going to go over there and have a conversation to gauge interest. Then that really lets the pressure off you, because if she's not interested, well, okay, fine. You've done what you said you were going to do. And if she is, great, you take it further from there.
Yeah. Another thing that I really like from his book too is that it's so funny. Like I had nothing on here to talk about Dr. Robert Glover, but this is great. But one thing that I really like about his book too is that he was like, talk to everybody. Go out and literally talk to everybody you meet. Test for interest everywhere you go. And it could be an old lady. It could be like the dude that's, pumping your gas, like whatever.
Yeah.
Just talk to everybody and test for interest. And there's like the three stages of testing with him. And by the time you actually do run into a chick that's hot, that you actually would like to get her number, perhaps, this is what you do every day anyway. Like you're already used to it. So there's no approach anxiety anymore, because you're just a social person at this point.
Yeah. You've got to get the engines running really socially. You've got to get your, like mixing my metaphors here, but you've got to sort of get warmed up. You've got to lubricate your vocal cords and just get used to talking to people all the time. And because the truth is this, and particularly because a lot of guys who come to this space, they're maybe quite analytical. Maybe they're sitting poring over spreadsheets all day, or they're coding, or whatever, all that kind of stuff. And I'm not one of those guys, but I'm certainly in my head a lot of the time, or I'm sitting over a computer or whatever. It's quite hard to then switch into a social mood from that, and suddenly there's this absolutely drop dead gorgeous 9 out of 10 smoke show walking down the street. Like it's very hard, like it's unrealistic for most guys to just suddenly switch into the super social mood and start talking to her. But if you build it up and you're talking to people all the time, as you say, whether it's the old guy and the Uber driver, the old lady working the kiosk, the barista, whatever it is, then you've got all of that reference experience inside. And so then when you see the super hot girl, it's less of a big deal.
To
go and have that conversation with her. Yeah,
definitely. I think I have a dating coach. I talk to like all sorts of dating coaches, as I'm sure you do too. A friend of mine, his name is Benny Lichtenwalder, and he referred to it to me, and it stuck in my head as social momentum. He called it.
Exactly. And what's interesting as well is if you go out, and this could be on a night out, or it could be on an afternoon, if you're walking around town and you're talking to people, the momentum builds throughout the session. So if I go out, maybe the first couple of interactions I have, perhaps they're not very good. I'm a bit rusty. My voice sounds a bit high. I'm not very grounded or whatever. And then as the evening or the afternoon or whatever goes on, and I've had more interactions, it starts to build on itself until by the end, if it's a really good day or a really good evening, by the end, I feel like I'm on fire. I feel like I can do no wrong socially.
Yeah.
And when you're in that state, then a lot of maybe the jokes you try or the things that you say, they land better. And it's not because necessarily you're funnier or because the joke got better. It's just because the way that you're putting it across, the way that you're presenting yourself is so much better because of your state. And obviously your state then translates into energy, and without getting all woo-woo and Pat Stedman about this, then they pick up on your energy and they respond in a different way to that.
Yeah, definitely. I want to talk more about this, but I need, this is the first time I've ever had you on. And so my audience might not be that familiar with you. How did you get into this racket?
And it is a racket. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, I was a slow starter with dating and stuff like that. I was a slow starter socially, generally. Really, I found it quite. I was quite introverted. I still am. I was quite shy as well as a younger guy, and I was sort of like never really got the girl at school. I would get these infatuations with different girls, and they inevitably wouldn't be interested. And then sometimes there would be other girls that actually did express some interest in me, but I tended to push them away because I was super, I had one-itis for Sheila or whoever it was. So that persisted until I got into until I reached basically the age of 20 and I went to university. And then, I mean, what it all comes down to in the end is basically I just wanted to, I wanted to get laid. I wanted to date. I wanted to bring women into my life. And I'd not been successful in that as a teenager.
Yeah.
And then I met my first girlfriend when because I went through this quite debauched partying stage when I was at university from about the age of 19, 20. Met my first girlfriend through that. And then as soon as that had happened and I'd sort of lost my V card and I was out of the gates, I then basically said to myself, right, I'm never going to go back to my former state of not having a lifelong dry spell. I'm never going to go back to that again. Yeah. And so what that meant was I was very motivated to go out and just talk to loads of girls. I was going to nightclubs the whole time and all the rest of it. And then there was a second step to it, because then, and this was some years later, because I'm getting on a bit now, so this some years later, then The Game came out by Neil Strauss, and that whole thing happened, Mystery Method and all that. And so I read that, and then I started to learn about these principles. So whereas before it had been very hit and miss,
right?
I mean, the one thing that I was doing right was I was going out and I was approaching a lot,
yeah,
but there wasn't really any science behind it, if there wasn't really any method in the madness. And then when I started to, and the internet was now coming up as well, when I started to discover there was all of this sort of intergender dynamic stuff you could learn, then I started applying that, and then that really then set things off.
Gotcha. Would you say then? I've read The Game. I haven't read Mystery Method though, which it's on my list. But The Game's, man. What I love about The Game is that it's like the family tree of game. It really talks about who all was whose influence and stuff like that. Would you say that Mystery Method was one of your influences then?
Well, I mean, yes, it was. And I mean, I haven't read The Game for years. I mean, I read it when it came out. I maybe read it a second time. I mean, obviously, it's very much the story, isn't it, of all those guys and everything, although there is a lot of nuggets in there as well. And then Mystery Method was the first thing. I've also read the book Mystery Method, which is a good thing for guys still to read, actually, although it's sort of, it's very much geared towards nightclubs in LA. And it's also geared towards kind of group sets, if there's a group of 5 girls, and okay, how am I going to go in there, and I'm going to maybe talk to the one that I don't fancy as much first, and then the one who I do like is going to pay me more attention, and it's doing all that kind of thing, which you don't have to do, because not all of us want to go to banging nightclubs and deal with big groups of people and stuff like that. You could equally just talk to one girl on her own in Starbucks, and that's equally fine. But the fundamental principles in the book though are very, very sound. So I read that, and that was actually when I first became aware that there was this whole space. Most people were talking about that. Really, they were talking about Mystery Method, and it was like, right, okay, so have you done this part? Have you done this part of the interaction? Yeah. Where are you in the interaction? And then it started to sort of become more diverse. Different people came in with different ideas. People like Owen Cook from RSD. It was a lot more about sort of more natural sort of interactions, more authentic interactions, and actually relying on momentum and state a lot more than having this massive structure. And so it became a bit more interesting then. It became less, you could bring your own personality into it a lot more.
Yeah, which going back to Dr. Robert Glover's book, I liked because he was big in that book about, he's like, look, if you memorize canned pickup lines and openers, you're just a geek with techniques. Whereas if you just learn how to be, sort of naturally attractive and, banter and funny and tease, touch and tell, like those types of things, like it's more of your own personality coming out.
Well, I think most people, to be honest, in their right minds, don't really like the idea of sort of canned lines or canned, routines and things, and that includes the guys and the women as well, because the women don't like it because it seems cheesy and maybe a bit manipulative and certainly inauthentic. So the girls don't like it, and a lot of guys don't like it either for kind of the same reasons, and also, apart from anything else, my memory was terrible, so I could never remember any of that stuff anyway. So I had to kind of go more improv. But there is some value though in having a bit of a structure in mind, because at the same time, the opposite end of the spectrum is to just say to a guy, "Yeah, dude, just go out there and be yourself." And they're okay, great. Well, but what do I actually do? What do I actually say? So there are some general principles that people can learn about, okay, so how can a conversation be structured? What are the kinds of things I should be saying? What are the kinds of things I should be avoiding? But then within that, I think it should be very much about your own personality. And actually, you go full circle, because while the idea of game was something that seemed quite artificial, actually, in the end, being authentic and being true to yourself is the thing that's going to get you to the end goal. But at the same time, you've got to be the best. Obviously, it's a cliche, but you've got to be the best version of yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So how long have you been teaching this stuff now?
Well, I mean, I've been teaching it probably for about 7 or 8 years. I mean, not as long as you might think, because I was involved with all of this stuff, and I was sort of going out and dating and doing it, but I wasn't doing it as a job. And then I got into doing it as a career, along with writing the books and creating digital content and stuff. As I say, about 7 or 8 years ago, and then full time about the last 5 years or so.
Okay. All right.
But as I say, my experience with this stuff goes back to about the early 2000s.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, and you're like me, a guy in his 40s teaching guys how to get laid online. Why aren't you settled down with a wife and 2.5 kids by now? Right?
haven't met the right woman yet. Well, that's a different question. I mean, but
I'm just fucking around, really.
I know. But it's an interesting point. Point, because I don't know whether you've seen this, but I get criticized for both. So when I had a girlfriend, I was with a girlfriend, and I would make reference to that. So, oh yeah, I'm my girlfriend and I blah blah blah. And people are like, yo, yeah, how can you be teaching this stuff? You've got a girlfriend. You're not even in the game, man.
Right.
So you get that. And then if you say, well, I don't have a partner, I'm not with somebody, I'm not married, they're like, how can you be teaching this stuff, man? You don't even have a girlfriend. It's like, your advice can't work because you haven't even snagged somebody. So you can't, you know what it's like online. You can't win either way, can you?
No, you can't. Yeah, I get that. I get that a lot too. Like, well, are you married? I'm like, well, is that an end state for you? Like, is that like why is being married everybody's end state? Because it's not. Well, it's not everybody's end state.
No, it's definitely not. And I think actually, well, I mean, for the first thing is that regardless of somebody's own personal status, that doesn't mean that they can't teach and they don't have something to bring to the party as a
right.
So that's the first thing. I mean, I could be celibate for the rest of my life and I could still teach this stuff because I still know all the principles that I've already learned, in theory. But the other thing is that, no, I mean, getting married is not, well, getting legally married, as we know, I think is probably a very undesirable end state for most guys.
Yeah.
And I mean, do you want to be in a long-term relationship? Well, maybe not. I mean, I kind of don't at the moment. Do you know what I mean? It's not like I'm sitting here crying my eyes out. I mean, actually, I'm quite happy with where I am. If I can date sort of I say casually, you know, like sort of in a non-serious way, and get on with do my work and, you know, enjoy the other things in life. That's a great end game for me, you know.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, when I first started the podcast and I first started like making TikToks and stuff like that, I was out dating. I was out, you know, and I'd make TikToks based on, you know, what I learned from that date and stuff, and you know, what I didn't like about this chick, or what I did like about her, what I did right, what I fucked up on. You know, I would do that kind of stuff, and then people were like, "Why should I listen to you? You don't even have a girlfriend," you know. And I'm like, I'm actually out here practicing it right now. Like,
I know it's none of it doesn't make any sense. They don't think it through. But I mean, I was the same, because the first thing that I did sort of publicly, if you like, was I was a blogger, and I was writing for Roosh V, had a site called Return of Kings, and I was writing for that for a long time. And basically I was the same, because I would go out every week. I'd go out and I'd talk to women, and I'd get into these escapades and blah, blah, blah. And every Friday I would write an article that would be based on something that had happened that week. So, you know, maybe something successful had happened and I could draw some learnings from that, or maybe something disastrous had happened and I could say, well, this happened to me, don't do this. This is the mistake I think I made, blah, blah, blah. And I think that is a really good discipline to have, because it's like, it's literally based in real life experience. You know, you can't really get any more real than that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I recommend guys do that more, like get in some kind of community, whether it's like a Facebook group or whatever, you know, online forum where you could swap notes with guys like that, because that's only going to make you better, you know. Or if you say, hey, this is how the date went out, and she was very receptive, like what do you guys think I screwed up on, you know? And getting feedback from your bros like that is super helpful for guys.
But I mean, there are dating coaches as well out there who are married, or they're in long-term relationships. And I mean, equally, you could say, well, when did they last actually have to go out and really put themselves on the line? I mean, maybe not for 10 years or something. So, and this is, of course, misplaced criticism that gets leveled against Rollo, because Rollo's not really a dating coach anyway. But, you know, people are like, hey, man, you've been married for 25 years, bro. But there are people who are genuinely dating coaches, and they haven't done anything for a decade or more. So it's like, well, why listen to that dude? You know, has he been at the pool party in Cancun having to put himself on the line recently? No, probably not.
True. But you could also argue too that like being in a long-term relationship is sort of dating on hard mode, you know, because like I
agree, but maybe, definitely. But it's also a slightly different skill set, I would say, isn't it?
It definitely is. Yeah. You know, there's pros and cons to each of these things for sure. So, let me ask, so you writing for Return of Kings, I know Cappy did too. Is that how you got connected with the Rule Zero and Rollo and all that?
Not really. It was more because that was more through Twitter, actually. Okay. Because I was like just shooting my mouth off on Twitter. I haven't been as active on Twitter really in the last sort of couple of years, for various reasons, but largely because I've been more concentrating on YouTube. But I used to be like on Twitter and shouting my mouth off a lot, largely about things like trads and how trads annoyed me, and and various conventions in Florida and things like that. And through that, Rollo kind of sort of picked up on some stuff, and we got talking, and that's how I kind of came into the fold. But it was all a trajectory, because I'd been doing the Return of King stuff, and then I had a Twitter account, and you know, it kind of just went seamlessly from there, really.
Got it.
But it's kind of amazing, isn't it? Social media, the way that you can connect with like-minded people now.
Dude, yeah, man. I never thought a year ago that I would be on Rule Zero. let alone like talking to like all the guys from Rule Zero. You know, so or you know, I'd say 2 years ago that wasn't even like on my radar. I was still like just talking to my podcast largely started from a men's group. And so I would have guys from the group on talk about like their dating experiences and stuff like that. So it's fascinating how social media does make it so much easier to like reach out to other guys in the space, you know, and a lot of guys in the space are really like down to earth, you know, they're just cool guys, you know, totally, you know, like Rollo, especially Rollo, Cappy, all the guys on Rule Zero are just like super chill, you know. If you're
Yeah,
if you're a cool guy, they're cool with you,
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's how it should be, really, isn't it? I mean, you see a lot of ridiculous stuff happening in the wider space. I mean, all these beefs going on and all this kind of thing. But I mean, it's just kind of a pantomime, isn't it, really?
Yeah, that the beef stuff. Like when I first met Cappy, Cappy was like, after we were done recording, I interviewed him for his book of numbers, and he's like, dude, you're so new to the space. Like you could talk to everybody because you haven't had a chance to start beefs with anybody yet. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll try to stay out of these beefs, as much as possible. But it's almost so many people get like all up in their feelings about stuff, and they're so protective of their brands that it's almost inevitable you'll get into a beef with somebody, or someone's going to have a critique of you.
Well,
it's crazy.
So I mean, somebody's gonna come out with some sort of a critique or something at some point, because it seems to be inevitable. I don't think you can. I don't think anybody can do anything online without getting a hit piece done on them at some point.
Yeah.
But it is what it is, man. I mean, it's I don't know. It's human nature, isn't it? What can you do?
Yeah. I sort of joke with Ryan about it. I'm like, man, if John Anthony Lifestyle like does a hit piece on me one day, I'll be like, dude, I made it. I'm here. Like I arrived.
Well, it's got to be on the way, man. I mean, he's done everybody in the whole sphere. So your day will come, I'm sure.
Yeah. Someday. So I've had other dating coaches on here. I mentioned that before. And a lot of guys, like, they teach what worked for them for the most part, right? Like, and they might dabble in a little bit of everything, but they'll focus on what was like their preferred method. So there's guys that do cold approach, dating apps, social media games, social circle, you name it.
Yeah.
What would you say is your preferred method?
Well, the main method, I suppose, that I teach really is cold approach. And that goes, I mean, I teach people online, so I've got some online programs and things, or I do online, consultations with people, or online mentoring. But also in real life as well, we'll go to Warsaw and we'll do 4 days of like infield coaching and everything. And so cold approach is my preferred thing to teach, really. Although, but I'm not agnostic. Sorry, I am agnostic about the way that you meet women. So I'm not anti-dating app. I'm not anti-social. So like I think however you're bringing people into your life is absolutely valid. I mean, there is a contingent of guys who will almost, if you didn't meet her by running up to her and saying that she looks French in the street, then it doesn't count, and it's like I disagree with that. So I mean, increasingly I'm teaching. I'm doing some consultations about dating apps as well now. And I just think however you want to meet, the initial meet is not the most important thing, really. The initial thing is, okay, so I get her contact details, or I get an initial contact with her, so then we're talking, and then the next thing is, right, we need to go on a date. And how you get her in that initial thing, I don't think really matters. And increasingly, it's going to be dating apps, because that's how the world is.
Yeah, I look at it like whatever works, man. Like, are you getting dates? Are you consistently getting dates? Are you getting laid?
Well, I know you've made the point. I know you've made the point several times that it's all very well banging on about cold approach, but if you're in an area where there aren't that many women, then what are you going to do? And I think that's a valid point. Yeah,
that's sort of my niche, right? Is like I'm out in the country. I'm out in ranch country in the middle of Colorado, and so like there's really I joke there's no cold approach in the cow pasture, is what I say, right? So really you're limited to online methods, whether it's dating apps or social media. Social media is great, and you could do like virtual cold approaches with social media.
Do you do things on Instagram and stuff then?
I haven't, but my friend Benny that I mentioned, he that's how he teaches guys. He has a whole program that he teaches guys how to pick up girls on either Instagram or Facebook, and it largely is based on a video cold approach. So instead of like when you slide into her DMs, you don't just send her a text message, you send her like a video of yourself, because she can see all of her all your faculties, your facial expressions, your tonality.
Not quite all of them. Not quite all of them, guys. You don't want to show,
Yeah. not the typical guys. Come on. No, but actually, so I met him in the online men's group that I came up through, where the podcast came from. And he was sort of like our resident dating coach in the group. And he would reply to all of our, if we put a dating update, he would reply to like almost all of our stuff with a video message, and that was sort of his way of like, sort of giving us his advice. He would give it to us free, and we became friends through that. And he ended up teaching pretty much everyone in the group like how to virtually cold approach. So
there's
cool. A lot of guys that have had a lot better success with that than doing dating apps, So, but either way, like I sort of look at it like guys that have had a hard time with online dating, with whatever it is, like, maybe a lot of times that comes down to like their appearance, because you're dealing with like pictures, and people make a lot of judgments based on your pictures. So if you're sort of, challenged in the attractive department, you'll probably do better in cold approach. And I think that's the consensus, right?
I think it's the consensus. But I mean, just going back a second to the dating apps, there's also, it may not be that you're necessarily a bad looking guy. It might be that you're choosing crappy pictures, because people obviously share their dating apps profile pictures and things with me sometimes, and I give feedback and everything else. And I mean, some of the dudes, to be frank, their pictures are pretty shitty.
Yeah,
and that's a big part of the problem. So that's the first thing. And then secondly, what are they doing? What are they doing with the messaging?
Right.
So you've got a couple of. So yes, I think there's a lot of guys out there who are like, yeah, the dating apps don't work, bro. It's unless you're a Giga Chad, it's over and all that. Yeah. But the first thing is, well, what are your pictures like? And the second thing is, well, what are you doing within the messaging as well? And there's a lot of pitfalls within those two things that could be limiting your success.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. It's like dating. I always say, like, dating apps don't suck. You suck at using them. And it comes out to your pictures, your bio, how you open and how you close. And a lot of guys, like, they might have great pictures and a decent bio, and they could open with chicks, but then they want to spend like 3 weeks trying to build rapport on the dating app, texting back and forth. And it's like, no, get off the app as quickly as possible.
Yeah. There's definitely things to be learned. And I think this is, by the way, just as a sort of like in defense of dating coaching, because there's obviously, you've got the black pill guys and everything. You've got the people out there who are like, yeah, man, dating coaching is a scam, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. But the reality is it's not. And the reason I know this is because I've taught so many guys who are just doing very, very elementary things wrong. And if they just switch things up a little bit, they start to get better results in dating, whether that's on the dating apps or whether that's in cold approach. Yeah. And so, and you don't, it can be hard to understand that until you've actually worked with guys, you've talked to a lot of guys who are having these difficulties, and you look at what they're doing, you look at their perceptions of how dating's meant to work, and it's just completely off. And you basically tell them a few things. You're like, no, tweak this, don't do that, do it like this. And they start to see better results. So there are 100% things to be learned in both the online sphere and in the face-to-face dating as well.
Oh, no, 100%. And like I said before, when I got out of my divorce and, got back on the dating circuit, the sex app, like, I had to learn all this shit. Well, I mean, which is funny because, like, going back to, like, you were talking about in high school, you didn't have a lot of luck, but it was in college that you started seeing success. I actually did have, like, I had lots of luck in high school, and, like, lost my virginity in high school, and I was able to get dates then. And I don't know what happened, but after, being married for 15 years, just completely out of practice. Well, like, I lost all of that,
maybe obviously you're probably out of practice, but also obviously the world's changed a lot, hasn't it? That's the other thing, because you get these guys who come into this now who are maybe my age or our kind of age, but they've been married for 15, 20 years, and they come out now into this, like, blinking in the wilderness of, like, what the hell's going on now? We've got TikTok, we're like, what the and so again, there's a lot of upskilling to be done there, isn't there?
Yeah. It's funny when because when I was a kid, like, there was no dating apps. There wasn't really. I mean, the online was just starting. Like, you had, like, Prodigy and AOL, but no one was using it for dating for the most part. So I mean, like, we would spend our weekends, like, in high school, going to the mall, cruising for chicks at the mall.
Or if there was any online dating, was seen as very weird, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was only until a few years ago, actually, that online dating was a sort of a, you'd have to thought of as a bit of a strange thing to do, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think after COVID, it became really mainstream,
Yeah.
because a lot of people just weren't going out, so like that was the only way to meet people,
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know about you, like I mean, because I had some guys in the men's group that I'm with from England, and England was very much locked down. But you travel all over the world, right? You're not just in England.
Well, I travel around quite a lot. I mean, I'm in England at the moment. I've been here for a while. I'm sorting some things out. But I mean, yeah, the lockdowns were quite strict, and they went on for quite a long time. I mean, it was sort of all phased out and everything. But I was with my girlfriend at that point anyway. So and that was. And I mean, that was difficult as well, because I had friends at that point who were traveling, and I had friends who were like, yeah, man, I'm in Mexico. Like, there's no lockdown. Everyone's partying on the beach. And I was basically, because I was with my girlfriend, and I don't regret it, but it's just how it was at the time.
Yeah.
I was with her, and so I was sort of locked down. Yeah, I mean, it's so I wasn't really out dating so much during the lockdown as such, because I was with her. So I was just sort of with her, just cracking on with work, just being quite focused.
Got it. For me, like that's really when like I started really getting into this stuff. That's when the podcast started, because out here in the country, like there were restrictions and stuff like that. A lot of businesses were closed, but still, like out here, like we weren't wearing masks for the most part. Like no one cared out here, and so it was actually really easy to date out here during.
Oh, really?
Lockdown. Yeah, it was like you meet chicks on dating apps, and you're like, okay, I'll meet you at the park. I'll smuggle some wine in my backpack, and like let's chat over some wine at the park.
Yeah.
And then you meet a chick at the park. You have some you click with her. And so then the second date, there was nothing open. So the second date, you're like, hey, why don't you come over to my house? I'll cook you dinner. And then, once you get a chick back to your place, it's like, it's a done deal anyway. But like, it was just so much easier. I was like, that changed my whole perception of dating, because I was like, before I thought you had to sort of like, keep taking chicks out on like all these dates and stuff like that before they would put out. And it's like, no, second date, get her back to your house.
Exactly. And that's another thing. I mean, going back to what I was saying before about guys just having a very not having a very realistic perception of what things are like out there. I mean, I was working with a guy fairly recently, and he was just adamant that he was like, yeah, but you meet these girls and you've got to take them for dinner at least twice, haven't you? And I'm like, well, no, you don't. And he's like, yeah, but they always want food, don't they? They want dinner. And I'm like, well, you're obviously meeting the wrong women, or you're doing it in the wrong way. But and that's just such an elementary thing. I mean, like people have been saying in this space for years, don't do a dinner date as a first date kind of thing. It's like a 101 thing that you would learn online, isn't it? About dating. But there are still guys out there who just haven't heard that. They didn't get the memo. They think that's absolutely the way to go. They think that you have to go on about 15 days before anything's ever going to happen. And obviously that's not the case. So it's little things like that. It's easy if you're online and you're consuming this content, or you're making this content, to think that everybody knows everything, and it's like, right, okay, what's the shiny new thing? But actually, there's plenty of dudes out there who've just got no clue about any of this stuff.
Yeah, no. That's why I think a lot of guys who have been in the space for a while too, like the old time red pillars or whatever, like they've heard it all before, so they're annoyed by it when you like bring up like basic information. But it's like, dude, there's always new guys coming in that haven't heard this stuff.
Absolutely. It's really, really true. And it kind of actually, I mean, because I've been doing a lot more like live coaching over the last couple, after the pandemic. And then when I started traveling again, doing a lot more like live coaching and meeting guys. And you really understand when you do that, what guys, where guys are in terms of their understanding, what their pain points are, what they're not getting. And I mean, like there's so many guys out there who don't have any awareness of any of this stuff. And they're just operating under very unhelpful perceptions of how things go down in dating, and that's where the role of the dating coach, or at least the role of the online content creator, is to sort of show them the reality of the situation out there.
Yeah, definitely. So getting back to cold approach though. So and we probably talked about this a little bit, but what do you think guys struggle with the most to get started with cold approach? Do you think it's approach anxiety?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the first thing is that guys aren't doing it, or firstly, maybe they don't even think it's possible to do, and if they do think it's possible to do, they don't think it's possible for them to do, and even if they think, well, maybe I could do it, they just lack the. I don't want to say balls because that's a bit derogatory, but you know what I mean. They just don't
Courage.
have the they just don't, they want to let themselves off the hook because it seems like a very difficult thing to do. So I think being afraid of the approach is the first thing that's wrong, definitely.
Okay. So what do you recommend for guys who are just struggling to get started, you know?
Well, I would say make it easy on yourself and start low and then work your way up. So maybe just going around and maybe just asking for directions for the first, just go out into the local town and or city and just, ask 10 people for directions. At least you're getting into the habit of opening your mouth and talking to strangers. And what you will see from that is that actually the sky doesn't fall in every time you talk to somebody. It's actually fine. And then after that, you could step it up to maybe doing some compliments. So you could be like, oh, hey, listen, I just saw you look really nice in that dress. Just had to say something. Anyway, have a great day. And don't have any pressure on yourself to make it anything more than that. But at least, again, you're talking to people, but now you've taken it a step further and you're making a compliment. Without having the pressure on yourself of, do I have to get her phone number? And then just build it up slowly like that.
I like that. That actually makes a lot of sense because I've heard where you go out and you try to talk to 3 to 5 chicks and try to get rejected. Even that by itself is kind of a daunting, mentally, I got to actually go out and set that as a goal and get rejected. But you just going up asking for directions, I mean, that's like zero pressure.
Yeah, I mean, I think the trying to get rejected thing is quite a good thing to do, but maybe a little bit later on when you've had a bit more experience, because you can sort of make a bit of a game of it. I think if you're right at the beginning of the process, and also maybe if you're a little bit nervous or shy or feel a bit repressed, a good way of doing it is as I say, going out and just starting conversations without there having to be this huge weight of expectation over it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I really like that. What are some methods you recommend to get past that approach anxiety? So let's say that they've gotten really good at asking for directions and they're really good at just giving a compliment. So now they need to require something of somebody, like get a number or whatever. Like how do you get to that level? Because that's still that's probably the scariest level I think most guys get to is actually requiring something of somebody,
Yeah, well, I mean, this is, I think, where the Robert Glover kind of thing comes in the sense that what you're then looking for, because say you were going out and you were just paying compliments, right? And you go up to 5 girls and you say to 4 of them, hey, you look really nice in that dress. They're like, oh, thank you very much, and whatever. And okay, bye. But what happens if the 5th one, you say, oh, I saw you wearing that dress. You look really cool. I just wanted to say something. And she's like, oh, that's really interesting. And her face lights up. And then she's like, oh, so do you live here? So what do you do? And she's obviously kind of engaged.
Yeah.
Then there, because she's shown interest, it's then easier to get into an authentic conversation. So part of it is you're looking for their interest in you, their sort of investment in you. And then you're proceeding with those ones. You're not proceeding with the ones who just don't really give you much of the time of day. I mean, there is then a structure that you can use for daytime approaches, which also works in the evening as well. The London day game model, it was called, which is basically a sort of a 5-step structure. And again, it sounds like now we're going back to being very scripted and everything. It's not really about scripts, but it's about having a structure to the conversation. So that there is that you can then start to use as training wheels for how you're going to structure these conversations. But
I'm not familiar with that.
So basically, so it is okay. So the first thing is approach. So the first thing is stop, and usually it's with a compliment. So hey, listen, I just saw you look really nice. I had to come and say hello. My name's Troy.
Okay.
Second part is make an observation or they call it stacking. So you might make a series of observations, but let's say you make an observation. So you say, oh, but you don't look as if you're from Michigan, or you don't look as if you're from London, or, I'm getting the sense that maybe you're from. So where she's from is a good thing to talk about. What she does could be a good thing to talk about. So, I'm guessing that you're a fashionista because of how you're dressed, or I reckon that you're a florist because you're carrying those flowers, or whatever,
Yeah.
And then when she gives you a piece of information, you can then start to vibe on that. So the next step is vibing. So if you say to her, sorry, the other thing is what she's doing now. So you could say, oh, you look like in a massive hurry, like you just robbed a bank, or, oh, you're so dreamy, whatever. Anyway, so you throw these things out.
Okay.
And you see what she comes back with. So if I say to her, okay, so I'm guessing that you're not from London. You kind of look Italian to me. And she says, no, I'm Spanish. I'm from Barcelona. Okay, now you've got a topic of conversation, which is Barcelona. So at that point, I would start probably talking about that. Say, I was in Barcelona a couple of years ago, actually, and I was at this crazy party. And I remember this time, there's all these people like drinking this sangria, and it got really, blah, 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 blah. Just keep talking for a while about the topic that she's given you, bringing maybe some of your experience to it, trying to be a little bit entertaining, whatever.
Sure.
And then wait for her to, what you're looking for then really is what they call the hook point. Okay, so is there a point at which you can tell that she's actually quite engaged in this conversation? And often, not always, but often that will be if she asks you a question. So you're like telling her this story about Barcelona, and then she says, "Oh, right. So did you go there for a lot? Was that for work that you were there, or
that's showing like she's invested, right?"
Yeah, because if she asks you a question, say, then like why would she do that unless she was happy for the conversation to be happening and probably to continue?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Sometimes it can be more subtle, though. It might be the way she looks at you, or she laughs, so you can just tell. You just get that vibe, But you're waiting for that sort of point when you can tell that she's invested as well. This isn't just you being an entertainer. There's something coming back from her. Now, at that point, you can then start to sort of relax it a little bit and get more into the more boring, mundane chit-chat of like, yeah, well, actually, I work around here. So how about you? You're at college. And she's like, yeah, I'm a student, blah, blah, blah. And you start to exchange some information about one another. And then the final part is you go for the close, or you which is basically often just getting a phone number. So you might say, hey, listen, it's been great chatting to you. You seem like a really cool girl. You know what? We should exchange numbers because I'm actually quite busy right now. But, I'll drop you a message in the week. Maybe we can catch up again. Keep it very casual like that. And it's at that point that you go for the contact details. Okay.
Yeah. No, that's actually fascinating. Yeah, I've never heard that before. Thank you for running through that.
So that's the basic structure. Now, I mean, there are other things you could do. Like at the end, you could go for a coffee with her immediately, or you could be like, oh, actually, hey, I've got 10 minutes. I know a cool place down here. Why don't we just go and grab a coffee or something? So you could do that. Obviously, if it was at night, you might say, oh, the smoky area's over there. Why don't we go and chat over there, or whatever, Often it's going to be getting a phone number because that's just the nature of how things tend to work. But, that basic structure, though, if you use that, and you can obviously vary the conversation, vary what you're talking about, but that tends to work pretty well.
Okay. That's fascinating. I noticed in there too that you said like, hey, I got to get going, can I get your number? Like that whole idea of like a false time constraint. How important is that, do you think?
Well, I think for one thing, it doesn't need to be false, because if I like often, if I'm walking around, say in London, I probably do have stuff to do. It's probably not, I'm not just there randomly. And this is the thing, because in the end, where you want to get to with this stuff is you're just doing it as part of your daily life. It's just part of your, it's just something that you do. It's not this kind of like, oh, right, now I've got to go out for 7 hours and do day game. It's
right.
Just
it's 5 p.m. time to go out and do day game.
Yeah, it should just be you're a social guy. If you see somebody that's interesting, you talk to them, and that's it, right? So for a start, I probably am going to be busy anyway, because usually I've got something to do. So I'll be like, so after a little while of conversation, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, something like that, and I'll be like, oh, anyway, listen, this has been great. I need to get going, but let's exchange numbers. I'll drop you a message in the week. I usually just leave it very vague like that.
Yeah.
But equally, there's also the other side of it, is that sometimes it is worth putting in a time constraint, or making her aware that you're not going to be there for hours. Because say say there was a woman sitting in a park and she's eating
Mhm.
lunch on her own, and then you see her and you think she's really nice, so you want to have a conversation with her. So you walk up and you say, hey, and you start talking to her. Now, the worst thing for her, particularly if she's actually not that interested, she doesn't want to have the conversation, is the thought of, oh God, this guy's going to just like, he's going to be here for the rest of the, I'm never going to get rid of this dude. Right. So if you put in a brief, say, oh, listen, I've only got a couple of minutes, but I just saw you and you look really nice. That can take away that anxiety, because you don't want to be monopolizing somebody's time either.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. You know what? So I have some notes here too on approaching anxiety, and I'm so glad that you brought up Dr. Glover's book, because his dating essentials for men, like the whole first, I wouldn't say like 1/3 to a half, it talks about how to deal with like self-limiting beliefs and anxiety. And so so I actually wrote down some things just for the audience from that, which was like, one of them, he says, like, use the 3-second rule when it comes to talk. Like, if you see a girl that you want to talk to, he's like, if you see her, you want to talk to her, you have 3 seconds to go talk to her, or else you're going to talk yourself out of it. So
yeah, well, that's a good one. And I mean, that actually is I think that's in Mystery Method, actually. I mean, that's certainly one that's been talked about for a long time. The only caveat I would make to that, though, is sometimes it can be good to sort of just get the lay of the land a little bit, because like sometimes you might see an attractive woman and she's standing outside a shop and you kind of think, well, is she waiting for a boyfriend, and sometimes she is. So you might want to just sort of just hang back a little bit and just sort of check the lie of the land. But in general, yes, because the problem is the longer you leave it, you're going to talk yourself out of it. And the quicker that you take action and just get it over with, it's like jumping into a cold swimming pool. The quicker that you do it, then okay, right, I've got over that hurdle.
Yeah. He also says thinking causes anxiety, but action cures it. So that also goes back to the jumping in the cool pool. Just do it. Stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
And then we've also talked about this a number of times too. Like, talk to everyone wherever you meet. It builds up that social momentum. It just becomes, something that you do naturally, and it's not even you're not even like cold approaching anymore. You're just talking to people,
Yeah, exactly. Well, we were in a big department store before Christmas. I was here working with a guy, and we were walking around one of the big department stores, and it was quite good, actually, because the mood in there was kind of social anyway, because they were playing some Christmas music. I think they had a DJ, and there was just something, that sort of build up to Christmas. And another good tip, actually, is if you just get into the habit of smiling at people, and again, not just the super attractive women, but just if you can, and it's quite difficult to do if you feel a bit sort of constrained and you feel a bit awkward, but if you practice smiling at people, what you'll find is that you will get people smiling back at you, and then it becomes very easy. If it's a attractive woman, or and she smiles back at you, it becomes very easy then to open a conversation. Not that she's necessarily fallen in love with you. I mean, she may still not be interested, but you could be like, oh, hey, And so we were going around and just starting very, very authentic, natural conversations with people. And it didn't feel like this big sort of like cold approach thing. It was just very, just like, oh, hey, how's it going? Yeah, so are you shopping, are you? So, what have you got? Is this for your grandma? And just having a very like low key, laid back, sort of fun conversations,
Yeah. Actually, we'll wrap up here because we're almost at an hour, but I just want to mention this. One of the things that, not smiling at people per se, but one thing that I tried to get in the habit of doing was making eye contact with people. Like trying to actively make eye contact with people was so difficult at first, because a lot of people don't realize just like how powerful eye contact by itself is.
Yes.
So the smiling thing, that's fascinating. Have you ever heard of the left eye thing?
I think I might know what you're saying. I'm not sure.
So I think I got it. I first got it from David Data's book, but he talks about, and I don't know if it's bullshit or not. But I talked to Alan Roger Curry. We talked about this a little bit because he talks about the left ear.
Okay.
And it's the same concept, right? But David Data, one of David Data's books, he's talking about like when you make eye contact with people, you try to make eye contact with their left eye. So like you're right, they're left. And he's like, the idea is that it's, it's attached to the emotional part of their brain. It's the emotional eye. You can really just start building like really good rapport with people when you look into their left eye. And I had this guy on my podcast a couple of years ago, and he brought it up again. And, and I had sort of listened to it in the book and just like went on about my day and just didn't think about it. But when I had this guy on my podcast, he talked about it, and he goes, you want to do the left eye thing, even when you're like, you're in a job interview, or if you're asking your boss for a raise, do the left eye thing. Cause it really builds this rapport. And like, when you do it with women, the women just are like mesmerized by it. Right. And I was like, I'll try it. Let me try it out. Like anything people say like this, I'm like, I'm going to fucking test this out. Science.
Yes.
This is a science experiment. Let's try it.
Yeah.
If it's bullshit, it's bullshit. If it works, awesome. So I started doing it on dates, and I did start noticing that chicks were really responding to it. And so to this day, I recommend it, but I also add it with the caveat of, I don't know if it has anything to do with like the left eye being special, or the fact that you're just making eye contact and it's giving you something to focus on. But
yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, I haven't done specifically the left eye thing, but no, I mean, mate, as you say, interesting either way. But but you're right. I mean, eye contact itself also does such a lot of the heavy lifting for you. If you could get good eye contact, then it's almost like the conversation almost goes out the window. It doesn't, you could get to the point where she knows what's up from the eye contact. You know what's up. You're communicating through the eye contact, and the conversation on top could be very banal, because it's being sub-communicated underneath, and that's super, super key.
Yeah. Another thing that I've been doing lately, and I suck at it, is I took Thor. Thor has a course on dominant masculine presence. Excellent course. And one of the things that he talks about is how if you walk up to someone and you nod, right, that's sort of a submissive gesture. And so he's like, like a more like dominant, sort of alpha, if you want to say alpha, body language is to tilt your head up. Right.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So one thing I've been trying to do, because I've been having for years of just sort of nodding, as sort of like a hello kind of thing. Right. So I have no problem making eye contact. I have no problem smiling at people, but now I'm trying to do this like head tilt up thing. I can't fucking do it, Troy. I can't do it for whatever reason. I naturally go down, and then I go, fuck. And I start beating myself up over it.
It's probably best. It's probably best not to get too in your head about things like that.
Yeah.
These details, because then you're like, oh no, I didn't do the thing, and I didn't do the left eye thing, and blah blah blah. But there is something to be said there is something to be said for that though, because another thing that guys will do, like, so nuanced, all this stuff. I mean, so I've just mentioned smiling, which is a good thing to do, but you don't want to smile too much, because then you get a guy and he's into the interaction. And he's just like, oh, like a nodding, like that soy face, like nodding dog, like, oh. And he's like, so where'd you work? She's like, Starbucks. She's like, McDonald's in the toilet. It's like, oh, really? Wow. Oh,
toilets.
You're a toilet attendant. Oh, right. Okay. Like, so you don't want to do that. And actually, where I would link in the head back a bit is you want to be a little bit appraising. After the first thing, you're like, yeah, you look really cute. I wanted to come and say hello. But after that, it's a bit like, okay, but what else is going on here? So you might look at her like, oh, okay. Oh, McDonald's. All right. Okay. And it's a little bit sort of, you're kind of summing her up. Like, you're not just blindly accepting everything she says as being amazing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and then like the not smiling thing too. I've also heard that like in dating apps, for instance, like you don't want to be smiling in every picture, because you actually come across as like a nice guy, and chicks just subconsciously don't want to date nice guys.
Again, like I say, I mean, it's this is why there's a value in talking about this stuff, because there's a lot of nuances in all of this kind of stuff. And so with the dating app thing, so I did a stream a while back with a girl called Tallulah, who's on a channel called Feminine Truth. I don't know if you know it or know her. She's a British woman. I've met her a few times, and she was basically saying guys shouldn't smile on any dating app pictures. She was basically saying, like, you just look super soy. So just don't do it.
See, I recommend at least one smiling where they can see your teeth, just because I was like, if you're like hiding your teeth in every picture, they're going to think that your grill's probably messed up.
But then, Yeah, that's true. But then there's smiling and smiling, isn't there? Because there's smiling. Like one guy I was working with, I was looking at his dating app pictures, and he had a picture where he was smiling, but he looked kind of, there was a, like his eye contact, the way he was looking was quite sort of bad boy. So he was smiling, but it was like, you know, there's a bit of an edge to it.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that's okay. It's that sort of soy face smile that you want to avoid.
Right.
You know, you like that in every picture because it's just that's a disaster. So, and again, you see this stuff we don't necessarily intuitively know as guys.
Right. Oh, no, guys absolutely suck at body language. Absolutely suck at it. Women are they're more in tune with body language. There's studies that show that women understand body language far easier than guys do.
It's often useful to think back to sort of movie stars and movie characters and things. And I mean, James Bond is obviously one that, you know, we go back to. So if you think of Daniel Craig as James Bond, is he going around smiling in a goofy way at the women that he interacts with? No, obviously he's not. He might be smiling with the eyes. There might be that little twinkle in the eye kind of thing, but he's not being goofy.
Or he'll have a little smirk or something. Yeah,
exactly. So think about that. Why is that seen as attractive? You know, so there's value in looking at what the culture shows to us as being like, why are certain people seen as attractive and certain people not?
Yeah,
I mean.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. And that's why a lot of guys they need help with that. I certainly did. I certainly did. That's why I still like study the stuff, why I have the podcast and everything. Troy, thank you so much for joining me today, man. Like, I've taken up a ton of your Sunday already. It's Sunday while we're recording this. There's a space-time continuum here, guys. Where can people find you online, man?
Well, basically, if you follow me on YouTube or subscribe to my YouTube, it's at Real Troy Francis. I'm on at Real Troy Francis on YouTube, also Instagram, and also Twitter, and also TikTok as well. Although my TikTok is quite small at the moment, which is even more reason to follow me there. But if you follow me on YouTube, that's where I'm sort of uploading daily sort of dating advice videos, videos about relationships and getting into relationships as an older guy, and all just everything associated with the whole dating world, basically. So follow me on those things. You can also get on my free email list. If you go to any of my videos, underneath you'll see a link, and you can sign up for that as well.
Outstanding. Troy, thanks again, man. I really appreciate it.
No, it's been good, man. It's been awesome. There's so much more we can talk about.
Yeah, no, we could go on for hours with this stuff. we'll have to do this again sometime.
Indeed. Good stuff.
Troy, thank you so much for joining me today, man. I appreciate it. You know, I really learn a lot from you and the other guys at Rule Zero. You know, actually, I've said this quite a bit. I say it a lot on my podcast, but having the opportunity to sort of sit with you guys on the Rule Zero panel and pick your brains and actually have a conversation with you guys, man, I learned so much. It's like sitting under the learning tree. What a great opportunity it is for me. So thank you for taking the time. I know you're a busy guy flying all over the world, basically being an international man of mystery. I appreciate you spending a few minutes with me and, you know, answering my questions and stuff and helping me help other guys level up and get better with women. I appreciate that. All right, guys. I don't know if I said this, but Troy, you're welcome back anytime. I think I said that, but you know, that's important. The guys who follow the podcast know what it means when I say that. If you don't know what it means, I'll explain it to you guys later. You know, DM me on Instagram or Twitter. I'll explain the secret lingo of when I say you're welcome back anytime. It's very important for the guys that listen to this show. All right, guys, if you haven't done so already, please like, subscribe, hit those notifications, drop a comment. Any comment will do. Your favorite emoji. I say this literally every episode. Get on the email or follow me on social media. The links are in the description. Man, it's a long day already. Just recording this stuff. It's a long day already, but follow me on social media. Get on the Patreon, patreon.com/comeonmanpod. You can join for as little as $10. If you want any kind of coaching to help with any of this kind of stuff, join tiers 2 or tiers 3. It's the most affordable coaching program you'll ever find. I don't charge enough. I absolutely don't charge enough. Get on the email list, list.comeonmanpod.com. I will send you some free stickers for your troubles. That way I can contact you if I ever get deplatformed. And then if you like those designs, you can get them on hats and t-shirts and mugs and all that kind of stuff as well at merch.comeonmanpod.com. And then finally, check out my Practical Law of Attraction course, loa.comeonmanpod.com. Once you get your mind right, everything else falls into place. tune in on Wednesday for the live stream. I don't know what the topic is because, I haven't actually sat down and planned that out yet, but I guarantee it's going to be good. And it's fun. It's fun just interacting with you guys in the live chat on the live stream. So tune into those. You'll get, if you guys hit the notifications, you'll get a notification when I go live. Just hop on in, say hi, and then send a super chat, support the show during the live stream. That's fun to do. All right, guys, that's all I have for this episode. We will see you guys on Wednesday.
This has been the Come On Man podcast. New full episodes served hot every Monday morning on your favorite podcast platform of choice. So subscribe now. Follow Paul on social media. The links are in the description. Now, go out and get it.